In the 13th century, a man named al-Jawbarī sat down and wrote something extraordinary. Not a chronicle of kings or battles, but a detailed guidebook to the criminal underworld. The Book of Charlatans documented hundreds of con games, frauds, and swindles operating across the medieval world. What emerges from his pages isn't a picture of bumbling simpletons, but of sophisticated criminals operating in the shadows of markets and cities. Today, we're going to find out what life actually looked like for a medieval scammer. Let's start with the man who would teach us the most about this world. Chapter 1. The Book of Charlatans. Al-Jawbarī was an unusual author. He claimed to write his treatise to help people recognize and avoid swindlers. Yet the level of detail he provided reads less like a warning and more like an instruction manual. He boasted of knowing dozens, even hundreds of tricks, and though he claimed to spare his readers the most dangerous ones, the schemes he described were remarkably intricate. The book catalogues scams from across the medieval Islamic world. There were over 300 distinct methods of defrauding people. Some were simple, others required technical knowledge, psychological insight, and careful planning. What strikes any reader is that these weren't the schemes of desperate amateurs. They were the work of people who understood their marks, understood their own limitations, and understood the mechanics of deception. Al-Jawbarī describes scammers as men who occupied a strange social position. They weren't part of legitimate society, yet they operated openly in markets and public spaces. They used disguises and false identities, yet they moved through towns with apparent confidence. The impression given is of a parallel world, structured and organized with its own rules and hierarchies. Chapter 2. The types of scams. The medieval marketplace was a hunting ground for con artists. Some targeted the wealthy through elaborate schemes. Others preyed on the desperate and the credulous. Alchemical fraud represented the crown jewel of medieval swindling. Charlatans promised to turn base metals into gold. They promised the philosopher's stone. The schemes were sophisticated enough that even major nobles fell victim. Gilles de Rais, brother-in-arms to Joan of Arc, lost substantial wealth to alchemist charlatans. The fraud became so prevalent that in 1317, Pope John XII issued a formal edict specifically forbidding false promises of transmutation. The fact that the Pope needed to issue this edict speaks to how endemic the problem had become. Medical fraud flourished in every town. Physicians would perform extraordinary feats of sleight of hand. They would surreptitiously place worms in patients' mouths, then dramatically extract them, claiming to have removed tooth-decaying parasites. Other fraudsters sold cures for non-existent diseases. Some created the illness first, then appeared to cure it. Religious fraud operated differently. False preachers claimed divine powers. They claimed command over angels. Some boasted of nightly teleportations to Mecca and back. What made these schemes effective was the use of shills, basically accomplices hidden in crowds who would pretend to be possessed by demons or afflicted with disease. After the charlatan performed his theatrical incantations and prayers, the shill would recover dramatically. The audience would be convinced they had witnessed genuine miracles. Food fraud was endemic. Wine was blended beyond recognition. Al-Jawbarī notes that ale fraud was so popular that people would trade their wedding rings for the stuff. One London pastiller named Henry de Passelwy sold meat pies filled with rotten meat in 1351. A customer ate nearly an entire pie before noticing the spoilage. When city officials called in expert pastillers to judge the case, the meat was confirmed as completely rotten. Spice fraud also flourished. Expensive spices were mixed with cheaper substitutes or replaced entirely with counterfeit ingredients. Monetary fraud operated on a different scale. Coin clipping represented an organized, sophisticated crime. Using simple tools like files, knives, and punches, criminals would shave silver from the edges of coins. The weight difference was subtle enough that coins weren't routinely weighed in everyday transactions. But organized rings would clip hundreds of coins, then sell or melt down the shavings for profit. The practice became so widespread that King Edward I initiated a full recoinage in 1279 and created special justices empowered to investigate clipping operations. Document forgery was another major operation. Medieval clergy, with their access to literacy and official seals, would counterfeit charters granting lands and titles. The period between 1000 and 1150 is regarded by scholars as the golden age of medieval forgery. Theft and burglary required technical knowledge. Al-Jawbarī describes thieves using child accomplices as young as 7 or 8 years old. Their small size allowed them to enter homes through tight spaces. A grown man would chase the crying child theatrically into a home, claiming the child owed him money. Homeowners, taking pity, would let the child stay. Once inside, the child would steal valuables or return a week later with a story of abuse, gaining re-entry for another theft attempt. If you would like to hear more stories about medieval history, hit that like and subscribe button. It really does support the channel. Chapter 3: The Daily Life of a Medieval Scammer. Living as a medieval scammer was a precarious existence. It required constant vigilance, ingenuity, and a willingness to accept perpetual danger. Scammers didn't operate in isolation. They existed within organized networks and criminal rings. Al-Jawbarí's description suggests a parallel world with its own structures and hierarchy. These networks provided security. Criminals could move between towns to avoid detection. They could receive warning of increased enforcement. They could share techniques and information about lucrative opportunities. Geographic mobility was essential to survival. Scammers posed as pilgrims, traveling monks, physicians, clergy, or merchants, professions that naturally involved movement and would arouse minimal suspicion. This itinerancy provided both practical protection and operational flexibility. A charlatan convicted in one city could simply relocate to another where their reputation hadn't preceded them. The tools and knowledge required varied widely. Alchemical fraudsters needed understanding of chemistry and the appearance of rare materials. Coin clippers required knowledge of metallurgy and access to specialized tools. Medical fraudsters needed anatomical knowledge, or at least theatrical timing. Forgers required literacy, a rare skill in the medieval world, and access to bureaucratic practices and official seals. What emerges is a picture of medieval scammers occupying a curious middle ground. They possessed specialized skills that elevated them above the common criminal, yet they applied those skills solely for deception. Early 14th century manuscripts like the Secretum Philosophorum detailed dozens of tricks for optical illusions and chemical effects designed to appear miraculous. One technique involved making water appear to transform into wine by using bread soaked in concentrated grape juice. When the soaked bread was placed in water, the liquid gained the color and taste of wine, convincing observers of an apparent miracle. These techniques represent genuine understanding of chemistry and physics applied to deceptive ends. Yet success in this world came with severe costs. Coin clipping was treated as a capital offense. The 1275 Statute of the Jury and the 1280 Statute of Westminster prescribed hanging or burning for convicted clippers. During Edward I's campaign against coin clipping in 1278 and 1279, hundreds were arrested. Many were executed. This included not only the fraudsters themselves, but accomplices, corrupt officials, and even goldsmiths suspected of refining clippings or exchanging counterfeit money. For those convicted of lesser frauds, the pillory held the head and hands in place, exposing the condemned to rain, snow, and deliberate attacks from passerbys. People threw rotten vegetables, excrement, and sometimes stones at the offenders. Ears could be nailed to the pillory before being cut off. Cheeks could be branded with hot iron. These physical marks served as permanent identification, marking the person as a criminal for life and severely limiting their ability to operate subsequent scams. Guild membership amplified these consequences. Fraudsters expelled from guilds were effectively barred from legitimate work in their field. Their reputation was destroyed. They had little recourse to lawful employment. This created a permanent criminal class separated from legitimate society by legal and social barriers. Medieval society did provide certain protections for desperate criminals. Sanctuary law allowed fugitives who reached a church to claim refuge. Their pursuers were forbidden to enter sacred ground. A criminal could theoretically remain within the church indefinitely, eventually negotiating safe passage or receiving a pardon. This legal loophole created a parallel system of justice and negotiation that occasionally worked in the criminal's favor, though church authorities would eventually pressure criminals to either submit to secular justice or move on. The social position of the criminal underworld was ambiguous. Some criminals, particularly those from noble families or those with connections to powerful patrons, experienced relative leniency. The most successful criminals often relied upon powerful connections to shelter them from prosecution. Some even became hired thugs for local nobility. This created a hierarchical criminal world where social status determined both opportunity and consequence, a reflection of broader medieval social structures. Chapter 4: Why it Mattered. The world of medieval scams reveals profound truths about medieval society itself. The scams exploited genuine vulnerabilities. Illiteracy left people unable to verify documents or read warning signs. Limited technology made counterfeiting difficult to detect. Religious faith could be weaponized through false miracles. Human psychology, so greed, compassion, credulity, and the desire for magical solutions, remained constant across centuries. The sophistication and organization of medieval fraud suggests that scammers were not mere predators, but creative problem solvers operating at the margins of society. The life of a medieval scammer combined opportunity with constant danger, requiring both ingenuity and ruthlessness. Their elaborate schemes and psychological manipulations stand as testimony to human cunning across historical periods. Fraud, as medieval and modern commenters have noted, is as ancient as commerce itself. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find my sources below, and see you in the next one.